The prophecy that doomed Rhaenyra's claim to the throne, House of the Dragon's darkest secret. In the history of Westeros, many have fallen chasing the Iron Throne. Welcome to the channel. Subscribe if you love House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones, and deep dives into Westerosi lore. Let's begin. But few stories are as tragic as Rhaenyra Targaryen's. Crowned the realm's delight in her youth, promised the crown by her father King Viserys I, and destined, so she believed, to fulfill a greater calling tied to her family's legacy. But what if her claim was doomed before it even began? What if the seeds of her downfall were sown not by her rivals, but by a prophecy whispered down the line of kings, a prophecy that clouded judgment, fractured trust, and ignited civil war? This is the story of the prophecy that doomed Rhaenyra Targaryen. The Song of Ice and Fire. To understand the fall of Rhaenyra, we must start with a secret that has haunted House Targaryen for generations. A dream, a vision, a warning. It was known as the Song of Ice and Fire, a prophecy passed from king to heir since the days of Aegon the Conqueror. Aegon, the first Targaryen to unite Westeros, did not invade simply to rule. He believed a darkness was coming, a threat from the north that would require a united realm to defeat. This prophecy foretold that one of his descendants would unite Westeros against the coming cold, and that only a Targaryen seated on the Iron Throne could save the world of men. King Viserys I Targaryen, Rhaenyra's father, believed deeply in this prophecy. It shaped how he ruled, and more importantly, it shaped whom he chose as his heir. Despite pressure from his council, lords of Westeros, and even family, Viserys named his daughter, Rhaenyra, as his successor. Not out of stubbornness, not out of rebellion, but because he believed she was the chosen one. A heavy burden. Viserys saw Rhaenyra as more than his daughter. He saw her as a protector of the realm. The one to carry the secret forward. The one to ensure the prophecy endured. And so, in a quiet, candlelit moment, he told her. The prince that was promised. The Song of Ice and Fire. The North. The threat that comes with the cold and death. Rhaenyra didn't fully understand. How could she? She was a teenager thrust into a world of prophecy, politics, and patriarchy. She was told she must be queen not just for power, but for purpose. But the weight of that purpose would crush her. The crown in shadow. While Rhaenyra was groomed to be queen, the realm resisted. Whispers filled the court. Lords murmured behind closed doors. A queen, a woman on the Iron Throne. And when Viserys took a second wife, Alicent Hightower, the political tides began to shift. Alicent gave birth to a son, Aegon. A male heir, one whom tradition would favor. One whom many believed should be king. But Viserys never changed his decision. He stood by Rhaenyra, despite the division it caused. Still, even as he tried to keep peace, the court was split. Two factions formed. The Blacks, who supported Rhaenyra, and the Greens, who supported Aegon. And beneath it all, the prophecy loomed. For Viserys, naming Rhaenyra wasn't just about fairness. It was about fate. But for those who didn't know of the prophecy, it was madness. The final mistake. As Viserys grew older, his health waned. And with it, the unity of his court unraveled. But one fatal mistake would doom Rhaenyra's claim forever. On his deathbed, fevered and confused, Viserys mumbled about Aegon, and the prince that was promised. He spoke of the prophecy, not realizing he was not speaking to Rhaenyra. He was speaking to Alicent. And Alicent, unaware of the true context, believed he meant her son, Aegon. That Viserys had changed his mind. That Aegon was the chosen one. From that moment, the die was cast. Upon Viserys' death, Alicent and her supporters acted swiftly. They crowned Aegon II king in secret, before Rhaenyra even learned her father had died. They claimed it was Viserys' dying wish. That he wanted Aegon to rule. That he was the prince that was promised. But it was all a tragic misunderstanding. The prophecy, meant to unite, had divided. The Dance of the Dragons. Rhaenyra's response was swift and fiery. Upon learning of Aegon's coronation, she declared herself the rightful queen. Supporters rallied. Dragons were mounted. War was inevitable. The Dance of the Dragons had begun. It was not a war of good versus evil. It was a war of family versus family. Brother versus sister. Dragon versus dragon. And all of it, rooted in the prophecy. Each side believed they were saving the realm. Rhaenyra believed her father chose her for a reason. That the prophecy demanded her on the throne. Aegon's supporters believed he was the one the prophecy spoke of. That the king's last words validated their claim. And so, the skies of Westeros burned. The price of belief. The war devastated the realm. Towns burned. Nobles fell. Entire houses were extinguished. And the Targaryen line would never fully recover. As Rhaenyra fought for her throne, she endured betrayal, heartbreak, and unimaginable loss. Her son, Lucerys Velaryon, was killed by Aemon Targaryen and his dragon Vhagar. It was a murder that sent shockwaves through the war, and through Rhaenyra's soul. In her grief and rage, she grew colder. Harder. The light in her eyes faded. The prophecy, once her burden, became her obsession. She began to believe that any sacrifice was necessary. That the throne was her destiny. That no cost was too high to preserve the future Aegon the Conqueror foresaw. But fate is cruel. A queen's fall. Eventually, Rhaenyra would sit the Iron Throne. Briefly. But her reign was short, plagued by betrayal and chaos. King's Landing turned against her. Famine and fear gripped the city. The people she sought to rule began to see her as a tyrant. She fled to Dragonstone, where her half-brother Aegon would deal the final blow. Captured and betrayed, Rhaenyra was fed to Aegon's dragon, Sunfire, in front of her last surviving son. And with her death, the war should have ended. But it didn't. The cycle of vengeance continued. And in the end, both Rhaenyra and Aegon died, broken by a war they both thought righteous. The prophecy in vain. And so we ask, was the prophecy worth it? Aegon the Conqueror believed he was saving the world. Viserys believed in that dream. Rhaenyra bore that burden. And Alicent misunderstood it. And in the end, thousands died. And the threat from the north, the long night, the White Walkers, wouldn't come for nearly 200 more years. And when it did, the Targaryens were long gone from power. The prophecy that was meant to unite the realm had instead ripped it apart. The tragic irony. What makes this story even more tragic is that no one in Rhaenyra's time could truly comprehend the prophecy. It was a riddle wrapped in metaphor, misheard words, and visions from a long-dead king. Rhaenyra thought she had to rule to preserve the world. Alicent thought her son was the prince that was promised. Aegon too believed he had divine right. And Viserys, he simply hoped that choosing love and family would keep the realm together. But none of them saw what was coming. None of them realized that the prophecy was not about them. It would be Jon Snow, centuries later, who would face the real threat. And Daenerys Targaryen, who would carry the last flicker of her house's power, before it burned out. The lesson of Rhaenyra Targaryen's story is not just one of ambition, or power, or dragons. It's a story about the dangers of belief. Of how prophecy can mislead as easily as it can guide. She was a woman fighting in a man's world. A mother torn apart by war. A ruler haunted by a dream that was never meant for her time. In the end, her greatest enemy wasn't her brother, or Alicent, or even the lords who opposed her. It was a prophecy she could never truly understand. And yet, perhaps she was the realm's last, best hope, before it shattered. Rhaenyra Targaryen died believing she was right. That she was the chosen one. And maybe, in some way, she was. Not the one to save the world, but the one to show how dangerous chasing destiny can be. The dance of the dragons toward